Life sucks and then you die. While most of us might feel like that in our day-to-day lives, no one knows it better than the characters in the Attack on Titan universe, like Eren and Christa. Yet despite this, they struggle against that death in their own separate ways, but come to the same conclusions in the end thanks to both of their mentors, Levi and Ymir, and each other. Tempering revenge with reality allows reconciliation within themselves and without in the world they live. But how do they come to this conclusion? What brings them to this moment? Well, when we first meet Eren, he is happy. Perhaps the only time in the series where he truly is, at least so far. Brought up in a household with warmth, parents, friends, and an adopted sibling, Eren spends his time getting into trouble, fighting against what he perceives to be injustice. It's what brought him and Armin together, and what kickstarted the protective Ackerman instinct and power in Mikasa. Fighting against injustice is the cornerstone of Eren's personality. And then his mom dies. The city he grew up in is destroyed, his father turns him into a Titan, not that he remembers it first, and then eats his father as that Titan in turn. This causes Eren to block out portions of his memory, because the amount of injustice he's experiencing is just too much for his adolescent mind to comprehend. And that cornerstone I talked about earlier starts to crumble, turning that burning heart of justice toward an even smaller, steadily obliterated core of revenge. Revenge against the Titans, and the injustice that plagues him. And so Eren screams and yells and tries to kill as many Titans as he can, and is immediately killed in his first attempt. This is the first stroke of reality, however, that Eren experiences. That while injustice between kids in the street can be solved simply with violence, the real world, the adult world, is much more complicated, as he will soon find out falling into web after web of conspiracy. But that stroke of reality is quickly extinguished by Eren's ability to turn into a Titan, the actual personification of both his unreasoning anger against the Titans and the symbolistic faucet of reality Eren has only known of simple violence solving simple problems. In other words, as a Titan, Eren is back in those streets as a kid, punching and delivering so-called justice with not only impunity, because the Titans really can't stop him unless they outnumber him or are rather intelligent, but also with the mindset of a child. Currently, it would be appropriate to see Eren's Titan transformation as little more than a temper tantrum. He can't really get his way by solving things with violence, but he's gonna try anyway, because that's all he knows. And in his pursuit of this childish revenge, he endangers himself and his companions multiple times. And not only that, but reality is, little by little, extinguishing that crumbling core of revenge as revelations like Annie being the female Titan, his own powerlessness against fixing the world by himself, and the people he considers brothers, like Reinhardt and Berthold, also ending up as Titans. The very ones Eren blames solely for his mother's death. And then Levi appears. Now, revenge is a two-sided coin, and just as Eren seeks revenge against the world and everything outside of him, Christa seeks revenge against herself, just for existing. The innocence of childhood was quickly taken from her, as her mother treated her as something to be ignored, and when confronted with that child, a disgusting, fear-inducing foreshadowing of eventual death. And so Christa finds herself lacking as a human, thanks to these experiences. And not much longer later, her mother dies, and her father, who she only just meets at the exact same time, abandons her, supposedly to protect her, but as we know, to use as a pawn in the future. Maybe. And on top of all of this, the only solace she could have hoped to have in this life in the form of her half-sister is taken away from her just as quickly as she receives it through the memory-altering powers of the Rice family. Though I would speculate that this would eventually crystallize into the actual resolve we see later on. Sadly though, Christa doesn't seem to remember anything at the time, which means she is officially closed off from any possible affection she could receive. As a result of all this, Christa seeks to use herself, someone she sees as having little to no use, in something, as revenge for her existence at all. She, who sees existence as something bothersome, a foe to vanquish along with her own consciousness, hurtles headlong towards self-destructive behavior, constantly taking abuse when she can, and continuing to act nice in spite of this in some act to rail against the supposed reality she's come to know. And then Ymir appears. Levi and Ymir, two mentors that open Eren and Christa's eyes to reality. For Eren, Levi is someone who will use him correctly, channeling that childish temper tantrum toward goals that will actually build up and help people, like fixing the hole in Wall Maria, rather than just the childish fantasy of destroying all of the Titans. And for Christa, Ymir is someone who values her, confronts her about her self-destructive impulses, and continues prodding her toward being a better version of herself, building up a person who deserves to live, rather than tearing down the existence of someone she sees as worthless, as Christa's been doing up until now. And so, armed with this newfound knowledge of reality, Eren and Christa, or rather Eren and Historia, finally begin to realize that life is much more complicated than revenge against the world or themselves. Unfortunately, these two have a little bit of growing left to do. In fact, their revenge actually starts to switch. Eren's toward himself and Historia's to the world, two sides of the same coin, and more alike than Historia would like to admit, until Eren's words in the cabin during Season 3, words that echoed Ymir's, get through to her. She finally understands what Ymir has been telling her all along, and in a similar vein, Historia's words to Eren in Season 3 after the revelations of their father's actions unlocks a reconciliation within Eren. And so Eren learned a little bit about Historia's reality before she was aware of it, while Historia learned a little bit about Eren's reality before he was aware of it. It's so much easier to see someone else's problems rather than your own, especially if you happen to share them with the other person. The sins of their fathers are not theirs to bear, yet they seek to anyway, and their responses were the same, to be used even if it killed them. Eren to be eaten by Christa so she could unlock the full powers within her, and Christa to be used by the scouts to eliminate the Titans until she inevitably died. But through working with each other and using what they've learned from their mentors, they start to reconcile their desires for revenge with the reality of the world and come to a strange sort of balance. Historia would become queen to save the people because she wanted to, rather than out of guilt or hatred of herself. She has worth, and it's her choice, just like it's her choice to go into battle and risk herself against the suggestions of those around her. And her choice ended up being the right one. A conclusion brought to her by all she learned and experienced from everybody who helped her, to become a warrior queen that the people, and more importantly she herself, can accept and respect. As for Eren, after comically punching himself in the face, he realizes his place in the world, and rather than sacrificing himself for some unattainable goal, he quells the revenge in his heart with the reality that life is more complicated than he gave credit for, and works toward fixing the problems in front of him that he's able to with the advice of friends and companions. In the end, it's ironic that these two reconcile themselves in two different ways, polar opposites from both their beginnings and each other at the end. Historia is only living for herself and her decisions now, that she sees as right and just, while Eren lives for others and listens to their decisions they give him to channel his power towards that righteousness and justice he sought so long ago as a kid. These two characters are, honestly, incredible foils for one another, and I will be very interested to see where they go as the series continues to move forward. Their character developments are a literal mirror to one another, starting out parallel, then crossing over, and then ending parallel to each other, well, at least for now. I wonder if their identities and decisions will cross over again one day, or even meet again in a single line. Oh, and one last thing before you go, more speculation than an analysis. Imagine what a child between these two characters would result in, both characteristically and within the bounds of the universe. Eren, who holds the power of the first king within him, one who listens to others but isn't bound by the mind control or possession of this king, and Historia, who only listens to her own heart, but would be possessed and mind controlled despite this if she were to eat Eren. A kid would be the crystallization of these two characters, an iron will and a compassionate heart from Christa, and the core of justice and friendship of Eren. Oh, and you know, the whole blood of the first king thing too, that's the most important part. So, would this potential kid be able to control themselves if they were exposed to the will of the first king, even if they found a way for the power to be transferred without Eren, dying? I, for one, think the kid would survive the process intact and unpossessed, a true successor to the first king and the two who birthed it, protected by the Oriental and Ackerman combination families in the form of Mikasa, and any kid she has, and with the power of the Titans. This potential kid would be the culmination of almost every plotline in the series, I think. But that's just speculation for the possible ending to the series, so I don't know if the author intends to ship Eren and Christa, but I honestly think it'd probably work regarding their mirrored character development. Maybe you viewers can point out something I missed, or maybe even disagree with me, and I'd be happy to hear your opinion. And to do that, why not leave a comment down below, or even on my Twitter? I've also got a Patreon you can donate to if you're interested in more analyses like the one I gave you today, and there's a lot of other videos like it I've already made on various series. Oh, and remember to click that like, subscribe, and little bell buttons for instant updates on when another video of mine goes up. But regardless of your decision, I hope you'll always remember that as long as you're having fun, it's all that really matters. I'll see you next time.